Did you know that not understanding the nuances of how to tighten your bow could be the reason you're struggling with tone, bouncing bows, or other unwanted sounds? The process of simply tightening your bow isn't too complicated. You hold the stick in front of you and watch the middle of the bow and start turning the screw clockwise or away from you, and watch as the hair moves away from the stick. Now, you'll commonly hear that you should tighten the hair until you could fit your pinky or a pencil in between the stick and the hair at the middle of the bow. Now, a lot of teachers use this technique. I've used this technique, and I think it's totally fine for beginners because we just want you to have a simple rule to get started. But if this is how you continue to tell if your bow is tight enough, you'll probably never actually get it. There's a couple reasons why you shouldn't use this technique to tighten your bow. First off, humidity. I'm in Arizona right now, and the humidity is probably between 8 and 15%, which is very dangerous for violins and bows, which is why I have a humidifier in my case. And I keep a humidifier inside of Merriweather, my violin. But let's say I take my bow out of its cozy little case and tighten it based on what looks right. And then let's say I get distracted and I don't come back to play my violin for 30 or 45 minutes. When I come back, the bow is way too tight. That's because the dry air and the low humidity causes the horsehair to contract. And the opposite is true for humid air. All this to say, the tightness of your bow can change drastically in a few minutes or an hour, which is why you need to be analyzing what your bow feels like throughout your practice session to maintain that perfect tension. Let's take a foray over to the left hand for a minute. You guys probably know I'm not a huge fan of those fingerboard stickers or decals because it causes you to use your eyes for an auditory skill, which doesn't really make sense. I often say it's like hiring a musician to do your taxes, which you don't want to do. Well, it's similar with your bow. You've got to develop a feel for the bow, and actually developing that sense of contact between the fingers, the bow hair, and the string is everything. We don't talk about this sense of contact enough, but I think it's the key to developing a better tone or using different dynamics and phrasing. Because your bow is constantly talking to you and giving you feedback through the contact with your fingers. So you've got to be able to develop that sense of feel so that you can make adjustments when something isn't going right, or so you can use your fingers to tell your bow, hey, I want a really lovely effervescent tone right here. And all of that starts with using your sense of feel to determine if the bow is too tight or too loose. So here are some exercises you can use to start to develop that feel. First off, start with your bow hair loose. So the bow hair is almost touching the stick in the middle of the bow. Now I want you to put the bow on the string in the middle of the bow on any string, and I want you to try to compress the stick down to the hair. Now, obviously, you can't really do it because the stick is already touching the hair. Now, go ahead and try to play some open strings. Try to play a scale. Try to play it forte and piano. And then I want you to try to make the bow bounce intentionally. And how do you do that? Well, you just tense up your whole arm right here. Like you're nervous. Clench everything here. Clench this, clench this. Well, you won't get a bounce when the bow hair is loose. Do you notice how I couldn't get it to bounce at all? Well, that's going to change. So now I want you to take the screw and turn it a half turn tighter, okay? And now try all of that again. Now, when you get to the right amount of tension, you can compress the stick to the bow hair in the middle of the bow. It's not totally easy. It does take a little bit of effort. I can kind of feel some resistance, especially as I'm right about to touch. I feel a lot of resistance there. So it does take some muscle control here, okay? But it is possible to do that. Then you can play some open strings, play forte, play piano. See if you can really think about how that feels. And if you can even describe that, how it feels, that's going to help you a lot when it comes to determining what feels right. Now try to make the bow bounce intentionally. Tense everything up. Okay, so I was keeping the same amount of tension in my bow arm that entire time, but did you hear? It wasn't really bouncing. at the frog or the tip, but did you hear the wobble in the middle? That is pretty much normal for most bows. Most bows are going to have that wobble, and that's just something that you have to learn to control, and you can. But let's try to make this bow a little too tight. I'm going to turn it about 2 half turns more, so 1 full turn more. This is what it looks like. So now if I try to compress, it takes a lot of effort. I almost can't make it all the way to the hair. And if you play, it sounds okay with the bow hair being too tight, but let's try to make it bounce. Okay, so tense everything up, do everything wrong. Okay, so I was doing the exact same thing I was doing when the bow hair was the right tension. Same amount of tension right here, but did you hear how much more the bow bounced and just created a lot of unwanted noises? And that's just with 1 turn too many. So I want you to work on doing those exercises a lot to try to develop that feel. Always be working on your bow hold. Make sure you can get a relaxed bow hold, because that is your contact with the bow hair, and the string, and that is everything. All right, I'm Laura from Meadowlark Violin. Happy practicing.